Well, everyone, welcome to another episode of the Iowa Gravel Series Podium Podcast. I'm your host, Chris McQueen, and like so often, we have an amazing guest with us today, Charles Erickson. Charles was recently on the podium at our 2024 Silver City Century on the 100K, of course, and we are so excited to have him to learn a little bit about him and the cycling team that he's on, which is Viking Cycling, because there was not just him, but another teammate on the podium that day, Brady Hopwood. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. But Charles, it is so good to have you on the podcast.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
So Charles, we need to start off with getting to know you a little bit. So can you tell us a little bit about where you are, where you grew up, and then of course we need to hear your origin story for like how you got into cycling.
Yeah. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska, born and raised, essentially the same neighborhood my whole life, moved around here and there and here and there, but kind of the same neighborhood right in the heart of Omaha. I have a wife and a young, I guess, middle young aged daughter, who's almost 14 years old. And we met in high school and things got started early for us, and we've just kind of been riding the roller coaster that is life as a young family, and settled down in the house a few years ago and have enjoyed kind of planting our roots, so to speak, there. I got into the bike from my uncle, who actually lived in Silver City for a short period of time. They renovated a house that's part of the National Historical Registry. It was the old mayor's house, top of the hill, and it had sat abandoned for 40 years. And they, as a kind of a retirement gift to themselves, my aunt and uncle, along with their son and some local help, renovated this whole house and lived there for 5 or 6 years. So my first ride, short of, the tootling along on the path, or going to the gas station to get candy bars in the summer with my friends, was on the Wabash with my uncle prepping for Ragbri. So being in Silver City, that was kind of a nice like mental full circle way to be on the bike. So that's how it started, and I found that I had a little bit of an aptitude for it, so the competitive nature just kind of took off from there.
That's so cool. I didn't realize that you had family in Silver City, or that was a place that you'd, kind of grown up a little bit.
Yeah.
Obviously not lived there, but had family there and things. So when around about what time do you remember kind of your first memory in Silver City? Like what time frame are we talking here?
2005, 2006,
okay,
somewhere in there. So
20 years.
Yeah,
20 years.
A little while ago.
Has Silver City changed much in the last 20 years?
No. I can't remember. Is it the Hood? Is it still called the Hood, or was that the previous place?
That was the previous place. Kevin owned the Hood. I forget Kevin's last name, but he was fantastic. It was definitely one of the places where we had like our post-race meal that first year of the Silver City Century. But now it's been taken over by a wonderful woman, Andrea, at Silver Spokes is how they've rebranded it and rebuilt that. So yeah, it's Silver Spokes now.
But no, hasn't changed much. And funny enough, I was talking to one of my buddies after the race, and was kind of telling the story that I just told there about them purchasing the house, and and I'm assuming the owner of the bike shop popped her head out, and she was like, "You must be talking about Al Getz." And my heart, I'm a very sentimental person. Sometimes, I just got this like really warm heart feeling, and it was like, yes, I absolutely am talking about Al Getz. And she remembered him, and he's got a bench on the Wabash, just, I guess it would be west of Silver City. But yeah, so that's, Silver City apparently hasn't changed that much, where almost 20 years later, the owner of the bike shop knows who I was talking about just by a few sentences. So
that's so cool. Yeah, Mary Jo is fantastic. Happy Trail Cyclery. If you ever if you like to follow things on social, she posts every morning the weather and trail conditions for the Wabash
Oh,
around that
that's
area.
great.
Yeah, so if you're ever wondering like how the trail is on the Wabash, at least up to Silver City and everything, check out Happy Trails Cyclery on Facebook, and you'll get the latest info.
That's good to know. I rode it
Yeah,
this weekend and the trails were not great, so I should have heeded her advice. Yeah.
yeah. Well, cool. That is so cool. We might have to come back to that because you did mention training for Ragbri. How old were you when you first did Ragbri?
This must have been, I think I was just out of high school, so 19 or 20 years old, and I'm 31 now, so this is 11, 12 years ago. And I just did the first day, but I mean, this is like, you know, sneakers, shorts, t-shirt, eating pasta the morning of, thinking that's what carb loading is, just like the episode of The Office where they run the marathon, like not, very, very introductory cycling. But yeah, I rode the first day of Ragbri. It left from Council Bluffs that year. So I suppose we could backtrack to what year that would have been. But yeah, left from Council Bluffs, did it with him. And I mean, it was probably 40 or 50 miles. But when you've only ever ridden down the block to a friend's house, it was, a jump for sure.
Yeah. So you weren't racing bikes in high school. When was the first time you like got on a bike to be like, all right, I'm gonna actually do some sort of like more organized race thing?
Um, I bet we're looking at like 2016, maybe 2016, 2017, somewhere in that time period. And I can't remember. Well, I guess I take that back. So he passed away in I think 2015, and I took ownership of. He had a Merlin titanium bike that was like three sizes too small for me, but it had Campy Super Record, Campy wheels, titanium bike. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world, and it was like you can't.
I mean, I
Yeah,
would kind of agree with you. That's a
yeah.
pretty cool setup.
And
Yeah.
also like the lineage of it, it was his bike. So I felt very honored to have it. And it's like, well, if you have this bike laying around, you have to use it. So I think I just started riding it from there. And then it just developed. But of course, it was like three sizes too small for me. So maxed out, it was still very uncomfortable to ride. So got a bike that fit me. And then, Strava, you want to chase the crowns. So my brother and I would just chase as many KOM segments as we could, which is competitive in and of itself. And then the local Tuesday night crit series that Jonathan Waite, who I know you've had on the podcast, who is kind of a local cycling legend. And I don't want to inflate his ego too much, but I know if he hears that, he'll his heart will
He'll
warm a little bit.
he'll just kindly say yes. Yes, I am.
But he is. But he put on this series, and yeah, that was my first like competitive event. Was just a Tuesday night crit around a parking lot of the school, and it kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a good snowball. I mean, what happened first, Strava or Tuesday Night Crits?
Strava, yeah.
How'd you get introduced to that?
I can't even remember, to be honest. So I for a very short period of time built bikes for Green Street Cycles. Lived next door to the owner, and that's kind of how that started. So the I think bikes were always like adjacent to my life, but up until like that 2016, 2017 time period, it wasn't like a mainstay like it is now. And then my brother got a job there, and you start to then run in the same community, and it's just like cookies on the internet. You look up one thing, and then you start seeing more and more of that, and so that's kind of how the frequency at which bikes and that culture exists in our life started to become more prevalent. And yeah, then it was, you know, chasing KOMs on Strava, and then meeting up with friends for a ride, and then scratching that competitive itch. And yeah.
Yeah. The so Green Street, were you working like in the storefront, or were you wrenching?
I was in the basement, so strictly building bikes. And when I started, I wanted it to be this glamorous, like building, be super high end, but I wasn't cut out for that. I was building hybrids, and the bikes that get most people on the road and interested in bikes, kids bikes and other hybrids. So I was in the basement, hidden away, and I did that for probably a few months, but made some good relationships with folks there, and it ended up turning into my brother getting a job there, and he actually did much more consumer facing stuff and service management, that sort of thing.
What's your brother's name?
Seth.
Seth. Is he older than you?
He's 4 years younger than me. Looks just like me, but blonde hair.
Oh, nice.
Yep.
I don't know if I've met Seth yet. I'll have to keep my out for him. So do you and Seth do you have like a training group, or do you and Seth still ride? Like what's kind of
Unfortunately, no. That's one of the things that my life's mission is trying to get him back on a bike. He had some knee issues that took him off the bike for a good period of time that he's had a hard time rehabilitating. So we've gone out a couple times, but it's just a matter of finding the right combination of witchcraft to get his knee back in shape. But he was my first riding partner. I hope that he's my last riding partner. Someone I care about a whole heck of a lot and enjoy being able to spend that time with. But now there's seasons of life, and right now is just one of those seasons where we aren't riding together.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Oh yeah. And injury, I think that is actually kind of always an interesting area that we can look at in terms of like the setbacks that can happen with injury. I mean, have you faced any injuries in your career here as you've gone through going from, I mean, I guess I'm honestly assuming, because if I hear anybody that starts off with crits, I'm assuming that there was an injury somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
Maybe that's an assumption.
I had a fairly good injury in 2018. I went over the bars at 42 miles an hour and broke my neck. Fractured my C1 vertebrae. It was a very small fracture, but I'm no medical expert. I'll put that on the table right now. But from everyone that I've talked to, it's just about as bad of a position as it could be. So I spent 13 weeks in a neck brace. My wife and I got married while I was wearing a neck brace. So that was, I've had falls here and there where you get some aches and pains and lost a little bit of skin, but nothing bad. But that's one that, probably tops the list.
What was that? Wow. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, C1, for anybody who's just listening to this and that doesn't understand or doesn't have too much familiarity with vertebrae, C1 is basically the bottom kind of your neck. It goes like C, T, and then lumbar. So CTL, I believe. The rest, yeah.
And then C1, I think, is the highest, like essentially at the brainstem.
Yeah, you could. I mean, if you had broken that severely, you would have been, quadriplegic, much like Christopher Reeves, in terms of like needing a ventilator to keep breathing, sort of thing. So that can be a very serious injury. Yeah,
and it was pretty humbling. It was on a ride, and family gets called in. Everyone's, of course, anytime someone goes to the emergency room. But I was up. I was chipper for the most part, I think, and then. They took some x-rays, they rushed in and were like, hey, you need to lay down. Like, we need to talk to your family outside. And you're just like, oh, this can't be good. And then that night I was feeling real down. Like, you feel tough riding the bike, and then to be, barely even able to use the restroom on your own. That's pretty humbling. And I was walking around in the hospital and kind of, did this number to turn,
looking like a robot.
Turn your head. Yeah.
Yeah.
And saw someone in a bed, like fully rigged up, wearing a halo. So they had the brace, the supportive piece, and that like 1 millimeter more of rotation when I did that number, and that could have been me. So seeing that like in a very vulnerable moment like that was, it made me realize that, like, yeah, this isn't bad, or this is bad, but this isn't, there are people dealing with far worse circumstances than myself right now.
Well, it sounds like there's definitely kind of maybe some themes here that we're picking up on your life, because for those that are on the audio podcast, the hat you're wearing says "always grateful."
Yep.
And it and the story, I think I'm kind of interested to hear a little bit more about, getting married with and that injury, and then eventually getting back on the bike and everything. Um, what what do I mean, what do you feel is like fueled you to, I mean, some people could get down after something like this. Some people could also be, they choose, maybe they don't see the gratitude and they see only the gap and things. So like, curious, just, your personal philosophy, like what has prepared you to be in this kind of grateful place, or this place where you acknowledge that, wow, things have turned out better than I thought, and how has that fueled you in your athletics and in your training and in your life?
Yeah, I think circumstances kind of forced a lot of it. My wife, who was not my wife at the time, just before, became a full-time caretaker for, at least 2 weeks. It was everything from needing help getting out of bed, and not that I felt that bad, but trying to put as much time and attention into recovery, in the healing process. It's getting help out of bed, it's getting help in the shower. This is really embarrassing, but like using the restroom, those sorts of things, when you really can't move the upper half of your body short of just your arms like that, are hard to do. Any sort of twisting motion is off limits. So seeing someone who is just like thrust into that position, you have to put forth a lot of care to be a person that can do that, and she is. And my family, we were getting married, and so all of my family's in town, and seeing them helping as much as they can, having friends pick me up and take me to work because I can't drive, and take me home, being willing to pick me up at 9 o'clock at night, and um, things like that, like the amount of care and attention I got primarily from my wife, and then family, and then friends, and then just the community outside of that. I think that kind of forces a lot of, it force feeds you some gratitude, and just recognizing that, I think generally speaking, people are good-willed. They have good intentions, good nature, trying to recognize that and just appreciate that most of the time we all just want what's best for us. Sometimes it impacts others in a negative way, but I think at the end of the day, that's what people want, is just to be happy, just what's best for them. And for her, that was supporting and caring for the one she loved. And I, yeah, it's hard not to be grateful for that.
Absolutely. No, what a beautiful thing, and so wonderful that you have that family and that support. So this brings, I think, a little bit of the dichotomy of cycling and being competitive. How
Mhm.
do you, who I think, as we listen to this story, have much to be grateful for? You seem like a really nice guy and everything like that. Um, how do you resolve that with like a strong will and desire to be competitive and win in these places? Like, how do you balance that in your life? I mean, because there's a lot of folks that, yeah, I'll guess I'll just start there. Like, what can you be a nice guy and can you be competitive?
It is tough. I think I'm competitive most with myself, and sometimes, my standard is here, and fortunately, it just so happens that the competition is right here. But the thing I struggle with is, if the competition is right here, but my internal standard is here, finding that 10% gap, or 2%, or whatever it is, to push past what I know is capable of myself, to then reach that next level. So I know what I can do, and I know a result in an effort that will make me happy, whether that's first or 58th. So a lot of the time it's just achieving that personal benchmark. But then something that I truly have like had to work at over the years is telling myself, like, okay, you deserve to be here. You can beat these people. You should beat these people. You shouldn't take that poll because you need to beat them. You don't need to prove that you're the toughest. Sometimes beating others is better than beating yourself. So that's something that's been a struggle. So I wish I knew the answer to that, but I'm still working on that one.
What is there? I mean, where do you feel like you learned that lesson the most? Like, was there a specific race where you came away from it going, geez, I should have done that differently, and it kind of changed your philosophy in that way?
I would say every one just a little bit. Something I've tried to do a lot more is being like very conscious of what's happening in a race. I think it's easy to, at the start, it's very intense, and then once things settle and fizzle out a little bit, you kind of know your place, and then it's just monotony for 4 hours, and then there's a little bit of racing at the end. But trying to be conscious of every moment, and especially in a group, taking smart polls, being aware of what others are doing and how others are feeling, and trying to internalize that. How can I utilize that against them potentially if it comes down to it? So I think kind of like turning on the race brain more than just the I'm out here riding my bike with some buddies sort of side of the brain. Yeah, that's been the biggest thing. It's just like trying to be conscious of what's happening during the race, and actually internalizing that, not just letting it pass by, but recognizing moments where there's successes and failures there.
Yeah, that's I've never really thought of it that way, in terms of like, you could use essentially your emotional intelligence, your ability to have empathy for someone else, and you can both use it for good, to be the nice guy, but also kind of use that same muscle and that power to say, okay, I think this is where that person is. I'm gonna react accordingly to win in this competition, sort of thing. So I think that's actually, I think that's really cool, and something you can think about, because I do know, there's parts of the world, and I think there's even little parts of gravel where we struggle with the idea of like things being competitive. We don't want it to be necessarily competitive. We want it to be like, hey, this is a fun thing. Everybody can be involved, and they can, but at the same time, we also want it to be a race, and balancing that within gravel can always be a little bit tricky, and especially for me as a race director. Which kind of brings me to, I want to ask about Silver City this year in the race, because from what I understand, it sounds like you were alone for a good chunk of that race. Do you remember a little bit of how that initial separation came about, and then what it was like, staying out in front until you came across the finish line first?
Yeah, I don't love riding in groups. I ride most of the time solo, which is something that I'm working on, because pack racing is important in a race and those dynamics. But so we came up to the first hill, and it's like, this is a bigger group than I want it to be. Let's just turn the screws a little bit and see what happens. And so I did. And then, being a bigger rider, I know that my ability to go downhill is probably a little bit better than others, or at least I can do it quicker than others, and it's not going to be as difficult for me to do so. So I did that, went hard up the hill, went hard down the hill, looked back, and had, I don't know, a 10-second depth perception is not my thing. So it might have been 5 minutes or 10 seconds. I don't know. But yeah, I had a 10-second gap or so. And then from there, I tried to be like really calculated about it. I knew that we would have a tailwind for the better part of the first half of the race. And again, with flats and downhills and hills that are not a huge grade, someone who's of a larger stature, relatively speaking, like myself, could kind of use that to their advantage. I knew the power I could hold for a half hour and the power I could hold for 3 hours after that, just from training and previous races. And again, like being cognizant of what's happening, remembering those numbers, remembering courses, and course profiles. And so, yeah, I just put in a hard effort for 30 minutes and really tried to meter my efforts to where it would benefit me and my overall speed the most. And by the end of that 30 minutes, I was out of sight, or at least situationally, I couldn't see who was behind me. So then it was just a matter of hunkering down and letting the little demons in the back of my head that were saying every time I look back that tree branch is someone chasing you. Yeah, so just kind of metered it out from there. But that's how it played out.
So it sounds like, and you kind of sounds like you went in with this strategy, and just given for folks who haven't been on the Silver City course before, the first 5 miles are pretty good sized rollers.
Mm-hmm.
They're just good sized, Lus Hills style rollers, a little bit more than what you might get in like Des Moines or even certain areas of Omaha. I think they're pretty substantial. Jonathan Waite, who you mentioned, said at one point, I think I think after his first time winning Silver City, because he's been on the podium a couple times, he said he's like, this was a big compliment for me because like I said, Jonathan's a little bit of a legend. He's like, this was the perfect course, and then he qualified for me. So I'm curious. I'm curious. Do you feel like Silver City was a perfect course for your abilities, or do you feel like there was potentially competition out there that could have given you a hard time on that course, or do you feel like this was really a course that played to your strengths?
Yeah, it definitely did. I think I can excel in something that doesn't have huge climbs. So another Iowa race that's in that same area, the Lus Hills Enduro that Raffle puts on. I love that race. But every year I find myself as the biggest of the guys at the top, or the smallest of the guys down here, if that makes sense. Kind of this weird middle ground. But there's a lot of really steep climbs there that are really challenging for me. But yeah, I felt really at home on those roads. It is a great course. Like, not to just say that for the sake of kind of lip service, but it was a great course. And it suited me well. Nice rolling climbs. The wind was favorable that day. It wasn't too hot. It wasn't cold. It was just right, I think.
Well, I'm gonna try and tap into the nice guy side of you, and we'll see how much of you push back on the competitive side. But on the nice side, what suggestions and strategies would you give to someone that's going into Silver City? Like, what do you think are the most important things to keep in mind with a course like that?
Yeah, fortunately, I was able to take the MMRs at my own, or the minimum maintenance roads, the B roads. I know they're called different things in different parts of the region, but for me, it's an MMR. Being able to take those at my own pace, because they weren't bad, but these rain ruts that you get that can easily kind of swallow a wheel that way, and then you go that way. I've seen it before. It's happened to me. That was huge. So if you're going into these minimum maintenance roads, even if it means you have to fall off the back, I think getting 10 seconds behind someone to take these at your own pace and to be comfortable and safe on them, to have confidence, that's huge. That would be, I think, item number one. And it's not like they're dangerous by any means, but anything at race pace, or if you're following someone's wheel closely, like you do in a whether it's a recreational ride, you're looking for that draft to save some effort, but doing that in those sections can be challenging. So that would be item number one.
Yeah, definitely have to think about the safety. And I mean, the fun thing about it's I come from a roadie background where, like, especially on those group rides, everybody's pointing out every little pothole and helping you dodge every little weird thing that you might come across the road, or things like that. And I think one of the challenges that, as you get into gravel, and I don't know, maybe at the pointy end people are a little bit nicer, but I haven't noticed this, is like, you got to keep your hands on the handlebars. Yeah. Like, you can't be pointing things out for everyone, even on a nice group ride per se. You have to have your eyes open and looking at what's going on.
There's a matter of self-preservation for sure. I think, we as the rider has to come first, or I as the rider has to come first. And yeah, you can't always point those sorts of things out. No one wants ill for anyone else, but if that is at the expense of me, I'm picking me in that moment. I'm keeping my hands on the bars. I'm staying focused. I'm watching what I need to watch.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's a team sport. And I've actually been trying to encourage a lot of folks, especially those new who maybe aren't as worried or concerned about being competitive, in that they think they're going to be on the pointy end of, or the podium sort of thing, but they're being maybe competitive for themselves. They're wanting to do their best effort, is encouraging people more and more to say, look, go find a group, work together as a
Mhm.
group, and you're going to go a lot farther and do a lot better and have a fresher day, and you're going to learn a lot. So I'm curious, you've got the Viking cycling team. Brady Hopwood was there, and I believe the founder or primary sponsor for
Yep,
Viking was
both.
on the course as well. Tell me a little bit about Viking, and tell me a little bit why you ditched your team.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So Viking, like as a, the PR statement would be, we're a company that paints, refurbishes, and services water towers. Um, which I think, especially in the Midwest here, water towers are they're a lifeline for a lot of these small towns. B, as a cyclist, like when I'm riding 100 miles and you're out on a gravel road and it's 96 degrees, that's just like a beacon of hope. I know there's a town there. There's probably a Casey's. So
Yep.
I can get there. I can get shade. It's a landmark situation. You know where you're going. You know what the next one is. So yeah, it's. I mean, it's a great company, and Rory, the owner, president. I don't know the technical term there, but he also really geeks out on competitive bike racing and loves riding bikes. So he kind of put together a team and has put a lot of his time, effort, and attention into being sure that everyone that's riding with him has a great experience. And yeah, so Brady, Rory, and I were there, and I didn't I didn't know that that's what my plans were going to be until it was in the moment, until I looked back and had 30 seconds to think about it. But they both did a great job. The road racing tactics, not pulling back a teammate, they didn't. Uh, Credit to them. And then I think fortunately it worked out for them where they could still have their own race. After 20 minutes of skipping a pole or taking a soft pull, they could have their own race and still get just as much competitively as they would have hoped for. But yeah, they were out there. They were out there doing the team thing. So that was fun and
That is
much appreciated.
what. Tell me a little bit about like what Viking does as a team, because from what I understand, this is kind of the first year or maybe a second
Yeah,
year. It's a fairly new team.
yeah.
What's like if someone wants to get involved, if someone's like looking for a team, what kind of team is Viking? What kind of teammates is Viking looking for?
Yeah, it's definitely competitive first, I think would be an accurate assessment. And that doesn't mean that we have every single one of the fastest riders or that we're trying to poach, all of the best riders from any one local team that we can. But like racing bikes is a core tenet of the team. Rory, Phil, who's another one of the teammates and a colleague of mine. We all work together, and it's after Unbound. It's getting coffee and talking about Unbound, or after one of the Tuesday night crits, it's talking about the Tuesday night crits. We all enjoy racing bikes, so I think someone who has a competitive interest is probably close at heart to us. But one of the things I appreciate about bikes is competition is not just a placing. I went to Mid South this year, and my competition was a goal time, and I think it's kind of like Ironman. Very few people are going to win an Ironman race, but everyone can set a goal. Everyone can be competitive with that goal, and I think that's for a lot of people, that's where bike racing or the competitive nature of bikes is just competition with oneself. So yeah, we're all on board for that too.
Oh, cool. Yeah, no, I agree. In fact, I think that a question I always like to ask people is, what is kind of your goal right now? What are the things that you're working on and learning on? Because I feel like cycling and athletics in general tends to be kind of a scientific method. You're the experiment, and we're working and always trying to figure out, okay, how do I maybe get to this next step in engineering my performance or putting some sort of structure around getting towards this goal that I have, whether it's time or a race or a bigger effort or whatever. So what's your goal this year? What have you been focusing on?
Well, speaking kind of holistically as a club, it's feeling things out. Putting on a club short of just like, hey, we all bought the same jerseys from Rafa or Alil or whatever, and we're all going to ride together, a couple times a month. It's tough to navigate. We'd like to put on an event or get ourselves involved with an event somehow. And I think just being like, I want more than anything some random person to be like, oh, I saw that guy in that jersey and he was super nice to me. He asked me if I needed his CO2 because I was sitting on the side of the road. He saw me throwing up on the side of the road during Gravel Worlds, and he slowed down and asked if I needed water. Like I want us to be the nicest people out on any given trail, group ride, whatever it is. So that's
just the nicest group that will kick your trash,
yeah,
but be really nice about it.
Yeah, that's gonna make you pedal with your eyebrows to catch up with them. So that's the holistic view of the goal for the year. I think, speaking for myself as kind of a member of the club, but then me personally, I think being better at racing a bike, if that makes sense. I think the performance and the physical side of it is one thing, but you also have to be good at racing a bike, strategy, pack dynamics, equipment choice, making smart decisions with your equipment and taking care of that equipment, nutrition, hydration, everything else that goes into what it takes to to come across the line in the best position you can or in the best time that you can. That's been a big focus this year for sure. The training is always there, but a lot of it is trying to dial in those other pieces.
Yeah. Is there one thing that you've learned recently, or that one thing specifically that you've played with recently that you've like, oh, well, that worked, or maybe it didn't work? Kind of your.
Yeah. I have a coach who is I think he's very, very smart, and that's one of the reasons I sought him out. It wasn't an accident. Zach Allison with Source Endurance, who is involved with a lot of crit races, gravel races. He's been in the scene for a long time, but I think he's raced enough to know that mindset is super important. So kind of managing mindset, and like when I'm hurting in a group, realizing that it's unlikely that I'm the weakest person there. So probably other people are hurting too. And other people are probably hurting as much as I am. So when you crest that hill and you're 3 bike lengths off the group of 4 people in front of you, and it feels so easy to just accept that's that group. That's my ride for the day. I'll phone it in from here, knowing that like they're hurting too, and I can catch up with them, and we're all going to be in a very similar situation. So I think managing mindset and recognizing that you deserve to be with the group you're riding with. You're there. You got there somehow. You have the legs to back it up, whether that's up here and it's for the win, or it's back here for this time goal. Like you're there for a reason. Just stick to it. You got it.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. Yeah, that's a very good reminder that again, kind of going back to that like ability to just use our empathy both for for good and for the use of like where we are, and staying in the moment, staying present, and not and I think that's another good point about that. That gratitude is external facing. Yes, you feel it internally, but you intrinsically start feeling gratitude and things like that because you acknowledge there's something beyond you. Nobody's just, I don't know, maybe except for who was it? There was someone who it was Snoop Dogg at an award at one time said, hey, he was up there accepting an award, and he's like, the first person I'd like to thank is me. I want to thank me for not giving up. I want to thank me for working hard.
Yeah.
Which actually I think is okay as well. That's also a useful thing to do. Like you said, to know you're there for a reason. So yeah, those are some good points. I want to go back to something you mentioned about being involved in some other events. And because we've got in September, Prairie Bloom, we're working with them on putting together the Glenwood Super Bloom, which is a women's only gravel race. And then Pisgah, the Soldier Cutoff Hill Duro, we've often had Omaha Velo come out, and they've done some aid stations for us at that race and things like that. We love having them. So I would love to have Viking out to a race, Silver City, if you've got a relationship there, or any of the other races and things that you're interested in. If that's something that you want to talk about, let me know. And I'm going to put that shout out to any other race organization or group that's out there. We love the opportunity to work with folks that are already, passionate about cycling and want to make, put on good events and stuff. So don't want to put you too much on the spot, but if there's something you're interested in, let me know.
Yeah. We were talking about that with the Super Bloom. Once I realized that it was a women's only event, it's like, cool, I can't ride. I'd love to volunteer and be there. So yeah, we'd like that.
Oh, that'd be sweet. Yeah, I would love to just have the course absolutely filled with folks cheering and awesome aid stations and help along the way. And so would Julie Bohr, who's the race director for that. So yeah, we'll figure that out. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we wanted to. Oh, here's one last thing I want to kind of hit on, and you mentioned it about carb loading properly and stuff. What is something that you've learned about you and your nutrition profile, that maybe some hard lessons that you've had to learn in the last 9 years of cycling, that maybe is not intuitive for someone that's just getting into biking?
Two things. One, all things are relative, and literally relative to body size. So when we see like a pro tour rider taking in 140 grams an hour, but there's someone that's 6'3", like they have a lot of stomach mass and digestive tract to be able to absorb that, and muscles to send it to. But for someone who's 5'4" and isn't working, at that same level, it's all got to be relative. So that was a big thing for me, recognizing that, kind of going the opposite direction, that what it reads in terms of a recommended serving size on the back of a package doesn't suit me.
Are you basically saying that you were under, like, your nutritional efforts when at first maybe you were underdoing it, and you had to learn to do more?
Yeah. So this year in some of my better events, I was taking in about 140 grams of carbs an hour, which kind of dovetails into the next thing that I'm learning, is that at least for me, temperature and water requirements really play a part in that. I can't take in 140 grams when it's 85 degrees outside, but when it's 50 degrees outside, I can, just because there's less water demand. So trying to find that right balance. I think I viewed hydration and nutrition separate, as opposed to being things that worked in tandem together, which they certainly do work in tandem together. So, it was just like, well, I've got a hydration pack, so I'll try to finish it before the race is done. But on the opposite side of that, it was very, I make little Post-it notes where it's like everything I'm going to eat for a given race. And I never mentioned hydration or sodium content of what I was eating, electrolyte makeup, in any of that. So it's been learning that water is, it's gas in a car. Nothing runs without it. So recognizing the importance of that, and then also that is part of the nutrition equation too. It's not a separate matter, at least for me.
Do you prefer to eat your carbs or drink your carbs?
I prefer to drink them just for the space requirements. I don't love having pockets loaded up with gels and things like that. But then I think you do sacrifice some of the hydration with that. I couldn't speak too intelligently to the to the dietetics of that, or like why the nutrition aspect of that, why that's the case. But I know for myself, like when I have 120 grams of carbs in a bottle, I'm losing a lot of the benefit of hydration with that. So there is a balance, but I am not I like gels, no solid foods. It's not that it's not palatable, but just takes up more space, less carbohydrates. I think on the bike, that's like the one time that we can eat that like straight race fuel. That's literally just carbs in liquid form. That isn't a healthy, balanced diet off the bike, but they're made for that purpose. And so I think we should honor that. And that's what works well for me.
Favorite flavor? Things that you're like, oh, thank goodness I have this flavor because that's you don't dread. There's some gel flavors, at least for me, that
Mhm.
I prefer not to have. I don't know. Do you have a preference, or you're like, no, all gels are fine. You don't care.
I'm generally a citrus fan. The brand that I've been using this year that I've had really good luck with is Carbs Fuel.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
yep.
they're great.
Also the value proposition. You know, the feed or not the feed, SIS and Morton, companies like that. I appreciate what they're doing, but when their product is essentially just over engineered sugar, and it takes you refinancing the house to train for an event with it, that's not that's not that's not practical. I don't think that furthers an already exceptionally uh, expensive sport. I don't think that makes it more accessible to others. So I appreciate what they're doing, where they try to make a very value minded product that also gives you what you need. That doesn't mean it's cheap, but it's cheaper than the others for sure. So Carbs Fuel, it's a good citrus flavor. Um, and then I love like the burn of a sparkling water at the end of a
Oh, at
race.
the end, I was like,
Oh,
what? At the end of the
I
race,
mean,
yes, yes, yes.
if it's available to me, I absolutely would. Yeah, I don't. I mean, soda does it a little bit but for me, just sparkling water where you can just like chug it and it hurts so bad, but it hurts so good at the same time. That's so citrus and that
All
sparkling
right.
water.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, we so the series is sponsored by Hammer Nutrition, so we have a lot of
Mhm.
those, and I think I have passion fruit right now. I think in my stocks, that and peanut butter, which I think are very. I wouldn't necessarily know if I could like connect those, like combine those two, or I'd have to
Mhm.
be careful like taking those back to back. But I big fan of the carbs brand as well. We've talked to them. Fun fact: one of the co-founders of the company, I believe, rides with a team called the Holy Cows out of Colorado, and so we had a good laugh about the fact that we have a race in Albia
Yeah.
in July called Albia Holy Cow. So we were trying to see if we could get those guys to come out and race with us. All right, so we've talked about nutrition, we've talked about training a little bit in competition and stuff. All right, to kind of wrap this up, Charles, because this has been fantastic. And we talked a little bit about this, but I'm curious about two things. One, what is one of the best things you think about cycling? And then you can start with this, or you can end with this, whatever you think is the better way. Your biggest pet peeve when it comes to sports. So like
Mhm.
the best thing about cycling and your biggest pet peeve. I'm curious about.
Well, I'd like to end on a positive note, so I'll start with the negatives or the hot takes. For me, it's like when we say things to, whether it's intentional or not, to take away from the accomplishments of others. Like, if I go to Gravel Worlds and I have X finishing time that's not a time that I'm happy with, that could be a time that someone else is just over the moon with. Like that's something that they could go to work the next day and tell every single one of their coworkers about and just be smiling from ear to ear. So I think recognizing that our our own standards are relative to ourselves, and sometimes they should stay that way. Um, you know, so if I have a bad race, I don't need to chalk that up to anyone else doing anything, chopping my wheel, unless someone, deliberately hurts me, which isn't going to happen. They just had a better race. They just had better legs. They just had better tactics. They just had more luck than I did. And sometimes that's all it is. It doesn't need to be a reduction of their accomplishments and their efforts. And I think that goes a number of different ways. Like there's kind of a movement of sorts where people are like anti riding inside, but I what if anyone's on a bike, whatever it is, whether it's a Peloton. Like, heck yeah, I'm all for Peloton. I don't have a Peloton, but I love that someone can buy it, train, get stoked on riding a bike. And they're going to look more favorably on bikes when they're driving to the convenience store and they have to wait for one because they're taking a minute to clip in at a red light. Like, bikes are good, and however someone wants to ride that, whether it's indoors, outdoors, in the rain, at the gym, in the middle of their CrossFit workout, whatever that's called, like we should be supporting that. And I think especially
get on a bike. That's the theme, right? Whatever it is, get on the bike. Yeah.
Yeah. And just celebrating the accomplishments of others. So that's kind of the good thing. So I suppose kind of bringing it full circle, like the bike does so many different things for different people. It's a tool for transportation. It's artistic expression. Someone making BMX videos. I loved watching BMX and skate videos when I was a kid, and like that's artistic expression. Someone who takes the time to put that together. And it's fitness. It's a burly on the back of a bike, and it's a bonding experience for a family. Like a bike does a lot. So I think we should, whatever that bike looks like, wherever it's at, whoever it's ridden by, we should be in support of that, because it does so many different things for so many different people, and just let them enjoy that.
Awesome. Totally agree. All right. Last question. What's your A race this year?
On the schedule, Gravel Worlds, I have a target time that I'd really like to achieve there. Mid-South was another one. And I'm not saying this just because, but given the fact that my uncle was from Silver City and I had that like kind of emotional connection to that place, I did really, really want to do well there. So Mid-South, Gravel Worlds, and Silver City was a B++.
Sweet. I love it. And hope we'll get you back again. I'm getting called up for a dinner,
it's time.
So we got to wrap up, unfortunately. But this has been fantastic, Charles. Look forward to hopefully having you back on the podcast and the podium soon.
I will be back on the podium and therefore back on the podcast.
Perfect. All right.
Confident.
Catch you soon.
All right.